In this tutorial, we're going to look at adding some new controls and modifying some controls that we've already learned. Open studentfaves.html in your Chapter 9 student files. And if we view this in a browser, currently this is what we have. In the last projects, we added breaks, BR tags, to separate our controls on our page. But let's do that with CSS instead. So in your styles section, all of the controls that we're going to add today are input controls. So we can use the input tag, and let's set a margin bottom and a margin top of 10 pixels. And then we'll also do display block, and that'll make those go on the next line instead of all being crammed together on one line. And there we go. So it's still not perfect. There's more CSS that you would definitely want to add to this if you were working on this on your own. But just for the sake of this tutorial, we're more focused on these controls down here. So it's good enough for right now. Okay, so we have an input for email addresses, and anytime you are designing anything that a user will input data into, you need to consider that they may enter the wrong data. Any way that you can help validate that data before it gets to the server for processing, you need to do that. And we'll look again at this more when we get to JavaScript. But one of the ways we can validate an email text box is by changing the type from text to email. So in the textbook, in the email text box type, change text to email. Okay? Now if we refresh this, when we try to enter an email address, if we just enter some gibberish and click submit, the browser will tell us it needs an @ sign. If we do the @ sign, it's still going to say it's not complete because it's expecting something else. Now, it's not going to validate whether or not that's a valid email address. It's just saying it's meeting certain criteria, certain standards. Again, we'll talk about that in JavaScript. But now it does work. Similarly, for our favorite website, we could change text to URL, and then it would expect a URL. So if I just do gibberish here and try to submit, wait, did I refresh? There we go. Please enter a URL. So it's expecting HTTP : or HTTPS : or www something. It's expecting something to look more like a website than just 3 characters. So those are some different ways you can do data validation. Let's look at some new controls. So below favorite website, the next new control that we're going to learn is a spinner control. A spinner control will give us a little up and down arrow. Well, let's just see. We'll just type it and then we'll just see what it looks like. We are going to use the label tag to label this, and we are going to enter grades. So not grades like what you make, but grades like you're a 10th grader, you're 11th grader, so on. The type for this is number. Oh, that's not what I meant. Name is grade, and ID is grade. And then for this, for the number, the spinner control, we're also going to include a min and a max. A min and a max value. The min will be the smallest number that you want the user to be able to go to, and the max would be the largest. So we're going to say from 1 to 12, because you're either in 1st grade or all the way up through 12th grade. Okay? So let's see what this looks like. If we refresh, now we have this. What this spinner does is give you these 2 up and down arrows, so you can go up, and when we get to 12, we max out. We can't go up anymore, or you can go down. Okay? So that is the spinner control that uses a number. But wait, there's more. We could also have a slider control, and it uses a range. So let's say rank your school experience 1 to 10. Now it's still input. This time the type is range. We still need to do an ID and a name. Doesn't matter what order these are in as long as they're in there. And then also for this, we want to do a min and a max because we want it to go from 1 to 10. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. This is a spinner and it uses number. This is a range and it uses range. This is a slider and it uses range, okay? So notice nothing's really displaying here. Like you've probably seen these like display numbers. We would need to do JavaScript to get those to work correctly, and we'll practice with that later on. But for right now, you're just able to slide it from an imaginary 1 to an imaginary 10. Okay, and that's the difference between a slider that uses range and a spinner that uses number. Next, we're going to look at data lists. Data lists allow us to take the best from a text box and a drop-down list. So you still have a drop-down list, and you also have the ability to enter text like you would in a text box. Let's see what this looks like. Let's add a label for favorite candy. Our input type will be text because you do have the text box feature. We're going to give it a name of candy. We're going to give it an ID of candy. And in a moment, we're going to add something else to this attribute, but I want you to see what it looks like before we do that. Now we have the text box. We also need the data list. So the data list, let's give it an ID of candy list. And that's important. I'll explain why in just a moment. And in between your opening data list and your closing data list tags, you'll have all of your options. Now these options, let's see, we need to give them a value and just put some candy in here. I'm going to choose Skittles. Okay, if you want to copy those over, go ahead. They don't have to be Skittles, Snickers, and Airheads. You can choose whatever candy you like. When we view it on the page, this is what it's going to look like. But there's some problems with this because really we just have this text box and our data list is not showing up. That's because we have to associate this data list with this text box. This data list has an ID of candy list. So if we go into this text box and say list equals candy list, which is this list, then when we refresh, you should have the ability to choose the 3 items that we had for options, but you can also type in a new, like lemon drops. I don't know, what kind of candy do you like? And now lemon drops also appears on that drop-down list until you clear your browser cache, but it is there. Okay, and that's the data list. All right, this one's going to be fun when we get to JavaScript. Let's make a label called favorite color. And this time, let's use the input type of color. And you can do name color, ID color. And when we refresh the browser, my favorite color is not black. Boom, you get your little color picker, so you can slide this around, get different color values. I'm really feeling purple today, so maybe I like purple. Later on, we'll code a site that uses the color picker to change the background of our website. Okay, one more. Let's do a label for birthday. And this time for our input type, let's do date. And our name can be B-Day. Our ID can be B-Day. And I bet you figured out what this is. It's a lovely calendar control. So we can click that and we can see I'm recording this on the 28th. We can go up and down. You can select today. Just a typical old calendar. Okay, practicing a little bit more with the field set and legend. I'm going to add a field set to the beginning of the form. And I want the field set to encapsulate everything except for my submit button. So I'm going to drag it right before that input type equals submit. And if I refresh my browser, now I have that field set, but I really don't like the way it looks. So let's go change its CSS. So let's come up here to Style in our embedded CSS, and we can target the field set by choosing the field set selector. And I'm going to change the border to 3 pixels, solid blue. You can pick whatever color you like. And if I refresh now it's a blue color. Still don't like the width of it, so how about let's change that. Let's do a width of 50%. And when I refresh, it changed the width. Now, what if I want some text to appear? Do you remember the tag that does that? If you said legend, you are correct. So let's add a legend that says, please complete the form. Let's refresh. It appears there. Now, if we want to target this text, we can with the legend selector. And maybe we just want that color to appear a gray color. And now it's gray. Okay. So we can target different items, like we could target our labels, tags, and we could change those to maybe a different, well, if I do color again, you'll see it easier. So let's do color purple, even though that's going to be ugly, just so that you can see how that targets the labels. Okay. So hopefully this helps you have a better understanding of how you can use CSS to target your controls and learning new controls. Remember, if you forget how to code a control, you can always go to W3C Schools and it'll give you the code that you need.